Hi. The scriptures, Luke 4, 1 to 13. When Jesus returned from the Jordan River, the power of the Holy Spirit was with him, and the Spirit led him into the wilderness. For 40 days Jesus was tested by the devil, and during that time he went without eating. When it was all over, he was hungry. The devil said to Jesus, "If you are God's son, tell this stone to turn into bread." Jesus answered, "The scriptures say, no one can live on food alone." Then the devil led Jesus up to the high place and quickly showed him all the nations of the earth. The devil said, "I will give you all this power and glory to you. It has been given to you, and I give it to anyone I want to. Just worship me, and you can have it all." Jesus answered, "The scriptures say, worship the Lord your God and serve only him." Finally, the devil took Jesus to Jerusalem and had him stand on top of the temple. The devil said, "If you are God's son, jump off. The scriptures say, God will tell his angels to take care of you. They will catch you in their arms, and you will not even get hurt. Will not even hurt your feet on the stones." Jesus answered, "The scriptures also say, don't try to test the Lord your God." After the devil had finished testing Jesus in every way possible, he left him for a while.
Hello, everyone. Hi. It's Denise here, if you don't know me. Love to meet you if I don't know you. Who got caught in the storm? Many people got caught in the storm. Are there any storm casualties? I understand there was at least one pot plant that was destroyed. Any other casualties?
A trunk, but it went into the trees.
Okay. Yeah. Someone I was with saw somebody have a branch sort of flying off their head. So yes, it was very exciting. That lightning was very exciting. Yes, we are doing our big year. One teaching of Jesus each month that we're focusing on, and this month we are focusing on trust God. I know someone who allowed her 6-year-old child to walk the kilometre and a half to school each day by herself. I asked if she was worried about that, and she said, well, no, because she prayed every day that God would get her daughter there to school safely. She trusted that God would keep her daughter safe. Well, I felt a bit uncomfortable with this answer, but it's a bit hard to argue against, because this person believed that God is a good God, that God loved her and cared for and loved her daughter, that God would certainly not want any harm to come to her child, that God is a powerful God and certainly capable of protecting one small child on their way to school. She believed that God heard her prayers and responded to them. So why would she worry about her daughter walking to school by herself? It made perfect sense. She had a deep trust in God. And as far as I know, nothing bad ever happened to her daughter on the way to school. This month has been about trusting God, and we've had some great speakers. We've had Jono and Ben over the last 2 weeks teasing out this theme, looking at it from different angles. And I've had various people acknowledge over this month that it's been a really difficult theme to get their heads and their hearts around. It's difficult because sometimes we trust God and it seems like God doesn't come through. We cry out to God and all we get in return is silence. What do we do then? So I would like to preach a sermon that clears up that difficulty. I'd like to. but I can't because I don't know the answer. I think part of our difficulty, but by no means all of it, is that we don't know what to trust God for. Like, should we trust God to protect us and our loved ones from harm? As we find ourselves in trouble, or we can kind of see trouble is coming ahead in the future, do we sort of put in a call to God, ask God to adjust the dials and the levers on that cosmic control panel that he has in front of him to change the path ahead so that it goes around the swamp instead of right through? Are we expecting God to change our green light to a red light so that the drunk driver driving erratically half a block away doesn't collide with our car? Do we give thanks to God that God protected us when the person at the next intersection is killed by the drunk driver? Surely it doesn't work like that. It can't work like that, can it? Is God there to smooth out our path of existence? Is God there to ensure that we walk through life trouble-free? Is that what we can trust God for? Or should we trust him to provide all of our needs? Because I've heard stories, maybe you have too, of overseas missionaries and pastors who are maybe struggling financially and they don't have enough money for the next meal or to pay their rent, and then out of the blue, some money turns up. It happens. In fact, I have a similar story myself from many years ago when I had no money and a broken car radiator. But it doesn't happen all the time. Maybe not even most of the time. If it did, no Christian children would ever die of malnutrition, would they? But I looked up the stats, and the stats said otherwise. What can we trust God for? I've been listening to the Bible Project's podcast series. Let me go back one. I've been listening to the Bible's podcast series on the wilderness. It's worth a listen if you're interested in this topic. Tim Mackey and John Collins, who do this podcast, they show that the wilderness is this literary theme that runs all the way through the Bible. It starts in Genesis 2. God creates a garden in the middle of a wilderness. Adam and Eve are in that garden. They get exiled to the wilderness. Cain kills his brother Abel in the wilderness. To Sarah, remember Abraham's wife, Sarah? She casts out her Egyptian slave girl, Hagar, into the wilderness. It's through no fault of Hagar's. There's the Hebrews, Abraham's descendants. They get chased by the Egyptian Pharaoh into the wilderness, which is kind of a reversal of what happened to Hagar. And then there's the big one, the Hebrews wandering in the wilderness for 40 years before finally entering the land of Canaan. Canaan, which is spoken about like a parallel to the Eden Garden. It's this fertile land and it's flowing with milk and honey. So we've got a wilderness that the people have to travel through to get back to Eden. But the wilderness theme doesn't stop there, even though that's a really big one. King David and his army, they have to hide in the wilderness to escape from King Saul. Elijah spent time in the wilderness, fleeing there to escape Queen Jezebel. And then all through the prophets, they talk about the wilderness. The way back to the garden land from their exile in Babylon is through the wilderness. The wilderness theme is even in our New Testament as well. People go out to the wilderness to get baptised by John the Baptiser. And of course, as you heard tonight, Jesus goes into the wilderness for 40 days and faces various tests there. So this wilderness, it's a bit of a paradoxical place, really. It's a very precarious place to be. It's hard to find food. It's hard to find water in the wilderness. There are dangerous animals there too. Life is just hard and it's uncomfortable and it's not safe. People die in the wilderness. It's a real possibility. When you find yourself in the wilderness, you realise how fragile you are, how fragile all humans are, how much we depend on things that are outside of ourselves, like food and water and shelter, like law and order and internet banking and having the paramedics show up when you call 000 because your husband's having a heart attack. Experiencing the wilderness shows us how little control we really have over our lives. And that's something that we might not realise if we never go there. We might not realise from our safe houses with our water that comes out of the tap when you turn it on, supermarket down the road, our air-conditioned cars. It's a pretty confronting thing to suddenly find yourself in the wilderness and discover these uncomfortable truths about life and about yourself. That life is precarious, that bad things happen. The cavalry may not show up. There are no guarantees. But the wilderness is also a place where people meet God. Because did you notice that God didn't stay in the garden when Adam and Eve were exiled from it, but went with them? And God sees Hagar in the wilderness when she runs away from Sarah's cruelty to her. And God is present with the Hebrews in the wilderness in a pillar of fire by day and a pillar of cloud by night. Elijah's ready to die in the wilderness when God shows up and provides food and water. And when the Babylonians come and destroy the temple and take the people of Judah into exile, they assume that God is no longer with them because they don't have a temple anymore and he dwells in the temple. But God reminds them that he is with them in the exile and will one day lead them home. People end up in the wilderness for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes it's the choices that we make that dump us squarely in the wilderness. And sometimes those choices maybe are unwise ones, like poor financial planning or ending a relationship and then regretting it when it's too late to fix, or choosing a career that doesn't fit our skills or our passions. Any of those things, they can drop us into the wilderness. But sometimes the choices that drop us into the wilderness can be brave choices, like deciding to be a whistleblower or to stand up for against corruption or injustice. You know, that can result in a long period in the wilderness. Sometimes it's the choices of other people that drop us in the wilderness. Our employer is the one that makes the unwise financial decisions and goes bankrupt. We're the victim of a crime. That drunk driver comes through the red light and T-bones us. Sometimes stuff just happens. A storm, you know, probably blew somebody's roof off. You get a life-threatening illness. That's no one's fault. That's no one's decision. It just happens. But it puts you in the wilderness nonetheless. In some ways, it doesn't really matter how we got there. The question is, what do we do once we're in there? I think that Jesus' experience in the wilderness is interesting because there's no food in his wilderness, and so after 40 days of wandering around in there, he's understandably hungry. And the devil presents him with this option. You know, you could use your power to turn those stones into bread. And apparently Jesus could do it if he wanted to, or it wouldn't be much of a temptation. It would solve the immediate problem. Now, just an FYI here, if you find yourself hungry in a wilderness and you have the power to turn stones into bread, I suggest that you use it and save yourself from starvation, because this passage isn't really God's instruction of what to do if you ever find yourself starving in a desert. It's more of a hyperlink. It's a hyperlink back to the story of the Hebrews who were wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. And they had no option but to trust God to provide them with bread, manna, every day. See the stones and the bread? It's a hyperlink. It's a hyperlink back to the story of the choice in the Garden of Eden to eat the poison berries that look so tempting, or to trust that God knows what he's talking about when he says, don't eat the poison berries. In Jesus' case, using his power to save himself would mean aborting the plan to save humanity. In Jesus' case, trusting God in the wilderness means he's prepared to go through some sort of short-term hunger pain for long-term gain. Next, the devil shows Jesus all the kingdoms of the world and offers all the power and the prestige and the wealth that comes with ruling over them if he'd just bow down and worship the devil. It's an offer to trade the vulnerability and the powerlessness of this wilderness experience for being invincible, for being impervious to suffering, for finding yourself on the top of the heap. Tempting, but he'd have to do it by following the way of the devil rather than following the way of God. And Jesus decides, I'm going to stick with the Lord. Finally, the devil takes him to the very highest point of the temple and challenges Jesus to throw himself off the building to prove that God will step in and miraculously save him. Which sounds just a little bit like the little girl going to school on her own. But Jesus says, I don't need to test God to trust God. Trusting God did not save Jesus from the wilderness experience. But trusting God is how Jesus figured out how to walk through it, what choices to make. What do we do when we find ourselves in the wilderness? I wonder if we can trust that God is with us in that desolate place. Trusting that God is in the wilderness with us, walking right beside us, whether we can tangibly feel God's presence or not. Because I think that impacts the way that we walk through that wilderness experience. Our trust will determine where we put our feet, which path to take, what direction the next step should go in. Does God put us in the wilderness as a punishment or as some sort of training exercise to get us to trust God more? Does God gleefully pull the lever that drops us into the deep end of the pool to see if we will sink or swim? Is God looking down from heaven at us, struggling in the wilderness, callously shouting out, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger"? Well, some may disagree, but I don't think so. I don't think that's how it works. I think finding ourselves in the wilderness is just an inevitable part of life. It's a human experience that's common to everyone. And I think that God goes into the wilderness with us and walks through the wilderness beside us, whether we know it or not. If you're in a wilderness, one option is to go to the book of Psalms, because a lot of those Psalms were written by people in the wilderness. And they are not backwards in crying out to God, in stomping their feet, in sometimes even accusing God. I mean, they really get it off their chest, It's a wonderful book to read if you're in the wilderness. Someone sent me a link to this book as well, which I haven't read yet, but I have read some summaries of it. And there's some interesting ideas in there. It would take a little while to process, but Thomas J. Ord is a really interesting scholar, and he proposes that sometimes God can't save because He is, the essence of God is love, and love never forces, love never controls. Anyway, it's if this is a topic that you're really interested in, I'd recommend that book to just kind of stir your thinking. Certainly, wilderness experiences profoundly shape our lives. No one wants them. Do you want a wilderness experience? No. We wouldn't wish them on anyone. And yet they shape our character in ways that just doesn't happen when life is smooth and we won't hurt our feet on the stones. Instead of trusting God to give us a shortcut out of the wilderness, or trusting God from stopping us from ever entering it, maybe we'd be better trusting God to be with us no matter what happens in there. And trusting that God is with us, maybe that will help us to figure out how it is that we should walk through it. I'll be back next week to talk about forgiveness. That'll be a hard month as well, I reckon.